Hello, today is December the 8th, and if you're here for the Content Advantage with Kevin Nichols, to hear him talk about creating a successful customer journey with content mapping, you're in the right place. My name is Scott Abel. I'm the co-host of the Content Advantage, a talk show for content professionals about content. And here's my co-host, Megan Gilhooly.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
There, nice to see you.
You too. I'm so excited for today's show. We're going to talk about customer mapping, and it's going to be a little bit different than what people might expect. So very excited to have somebody who knows an awful lot about enterprise content strategy and personalization. We have with us Kevin Nichols. Kevin, thanks for joining us. Really good to see you.
Hey, everyone. Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm well. I'm on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. It's nice and cold here. We finally got a dusting of snow, so exciting times on the Cape, as we like to say.
And we hear you just had an earthquake there. That's crazy to me.
We did like a few weeks ago, and we never have earthquakes. I've never felt one. It was weird.
All right, we're gonna have an earthquake-free show today, even though I'm broadcasting from the area. San Andreas Fault is like without, outside my window. But before we get started, let's tell the audience members who may be joining us for the first time a few things. First, today's show is being recorded, so if you need to leave a little bit early and you're worried that you're going to miss something, don't worry about that. There's a link you can use to watch the recording. We'll send you that in an email shortly after the show. Happens to be the exact same link that you're using to watch today's show, so if you've got that, just keep it handy, and you can return back and watch the recording at any time. Also, we can't see or hear you, so you don't have to worry about your camera or microphone. You may ask us a question at any time during the show by using the Ask a Question tab located underneath your webinar viewing panel. That allows you to text a question into our queue. We can't text you back, but we'll know that you've asked a question, and we'll try to slide in as many as possible with the time that we have remaining in the show. There's also some additional content located in the attachments and links section of your webinar panel. It allows you to access information about today's show, about our presenter, including some content provided by Kevin, and some handouts provided by Zoom software, the sponsor of today's show. All right, so those are our announcements. Let's get this show on the road.
Great, thanks, Scott. So Kevin, we want to hear about you. Tell our audience a little bit about what you do, give us a brief introduction, and then also include how you are connected to this idea of customer journey mapping and content mapping.
Great. Yeah. So I've been doing content oriented type work for years. Way back when we all started in the internet in the 90s. I worked for a company called Sapient in the early 2000s. Then I got laid off when the bubble burst. Yep. I went to work for MIT, and they did an initiative called OpenCourseWare, where they put all their courses online and made them available to the world for free. Now, you couldn't get a degree, but they put the course materials on, and this was a major content project.
Right.
Because they had to figure out, how do we publish? Well, first of all, how do we structure course curriculum and standardize it, and then publish it and make it available to an audience all over the world? And that was my first entree really into content projects and all the thorny issues, including the politics involved of trying to wrangle a bunch of professors of various different domains and expertise together. And then from there, I just got into content. Working with large enterprises. I worked for a company called Molecular. Hewlett Packard was my client. Worked with their marketing and Marcom group to really try to structure content solutions. And that was with their learning products group. So a lot of technical content there. Then did my own thing. Then back to Sapient, where I headed up content strategy for them. Then launched a company with Rebecca Schneider called Avenue CX. We specialize in enterprise content strategy solutions. We do a lot around personalization, customer journey, taxonomy, metadata, customer-focused content, but also technical documentation, CCMSs, intelligent content solutions, and so forth. So we do a lot with various types of content solutions. I wrote a book a few years ago called Enterprise Content Strategy, a Project Guide. And so my forte has always been looking at these big complex content problems and trying to help brands or organizations think their way through how to solve them. And excellent. I always like to look at where the customer fits into that puzzle, because I think that at the end of the day, we're trying to get the most meaningful and relevant content out to improve our relationships with our customer and develop more meaningful customer interactions and experiences.
That's a great segue, which is why I wanted to invite you to be on today's show. And Megan and I were excited to have you here. Today's show is entitled Creating a Successful Customer Journey and Content Mapping. So let's dive right into the first of those two topics. Kevin,
Sure.
Can you help our audience understand what you mean when you say the customer journey?
Yes. And this is really, and I'm glad you asked that question. It's a very important one, and it gets thrown around a lot out there. So the best way to explain this is to actually show you an example of a couple of
oh, good. Yes, please.
journeys. I'm going to pull up a journey map, first of all, and I want to draw the distinction between when I call a journey versus a journey map, which is a type of journey, by the way. Let me know. Oh, no, I just got this announcement from Bright. Hold on one second. Okay, share screen.
You can
as much
do it.
as I work, I know, as much as I work in technology, you'd think that I'd be an expert at. Okay, let me know when you can see my screen.
Oh, yes, very good.
You can see it.
This is not my journey map. You can go online, you can Google, you're going to find this as one of the representative ones. A journey map is a high-level visualization of a customer's life cycle with a brand. And many of you that have probably interacted with journeys have seen journey maps. And an organization will make an investment in a journey map to try to detail out a customer relationship with a brand, the various touch points that they engage with, and how they interact with the brand and what they think, feel in the process of doing so. It tracks a life cycle. So you can see here in this particular one, it's awareness, consideration, decision, delivery, loyalty. And this takes them through the various activities they engage with when they're doing it, what their goals are, what the touch points, their experiences, etc. This is a high-level journey. And this, again, represents that. Again, this is a journey. When I'm talking about journeys today and content mapping, this is useful to a certain degree. You can map content at a high level. We could map content types to this and say, you know, in the awareness stage, we want to show them content that makes them aware of our brand. And that allows you to map it to a certain degree. When we want to take this to a more actionable level and take it down a notch, I like to develop what I call more specific cross-channel customer journeys. Okay. For those of you that worked in the internet back in the day, you may have thought of these as scenarios or process flows or user scenarios or clickstream documentations, etc. The difference is that they're now cross-channel and they're more complex than just something you would develop for the web. And what we use to do that today is something that looks like this. And what I'm showing you here is a cross-channel user journey that's based on a particular task. And the components that comprise a journey are a task. If you have that journey map, you want to show which phase of the journey map is a part of this. You're going to show the user state if you're doing personalization. We can talk a little bit more about that, or you know, we can get into that later. You want to show the channel or the customer touch point, and then you want to show the content. So let's break this down just a little bit more. The task is the steps that they're undertaking in order to complete what it is that they're trying to complete. So in this case, you have a user that wants to find the best person to partner with, the best company to partner with in solar IoT panels. And they go through a series of steps to do that, to conduct that research. They search online, that takes them to, they see a banner, they click on it, that then takes them to a home page. They bookmark that page. They may go off the site and look at other competitors. They return to the home page. They're prompted for a white paper specific to that solution because you've done your journey work and you know that if they've searched on those keywords and they've landed back on your home page, you're going to give them that content. They receive an email and a PDF once they've registered, and there's a page on that email that's customized to them, and then so forth. You'll see here, down here, that there's specific content that's mapped along each step of the way, and that content's at a pretty micro level. So for example, in step 5, when they return to the company homepage, you'll see that in the chatbot, one of the pieces of content you can offer up is you ask this person if she wants the newest circuit board technology related to solar technology. And you'll see, and when we say spotlights, that's like this, the CMS that we're using here is is Sitecore.
Okay.
But it could be any type of content management system. A Spotlight's just a module or an area in a CMS where you would call out the content. Hero Space is like where you would call it out on a homepage, for example.
Right.
But these are just modules or promotional areas that you're calling this out. And you can see that we've mapped out with each step, specific areas that are content opportunities, and we've mapped specific pieces of content to this. And this is more marketing focused, but you can also see there's overlap of what could be technical content here, because quickly you could get into possibly offering up a data sheet or specifications or features that are product focused or product centric in this particular scenario. So I'm going to unshare this, but this gives you a sense of what I'm talking about when I say customer journey. I'm talking about a task that breaks down into steps that also includes touch points that you can then map specific pieces of content to. And just quickly, if we were going to say, well, what do you have to do in order to do this? It would start with forming a team that's collaborative. You would come up with a set of key tasks and prioritize them. You would break those tasks down into manageable steps, and you would identify content at each point. Obviously building measurements into it and then testing each solution to make sure that it works. And that's how journeys are generally built out. I'm going to stop unsharing. I'm trying to stop unsharing.
It's
very nice.
Difficult.
You know, Kevin, I love that you covered sort of the macro level customer journey, because I think that's what most of us think of when we think of a customer journey.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also broke it down. I used to call them scenarios, so I love that you use that word. But you broke it down into these various scenarios, these sort of micro journeys that each customer is going on. And then I assume you take the micro and you sort of map it up to the macro at some point. But what really are the biggest benefits or the things we can get out of diving into the micro journeys that you talked about?
Well, first of all, you make that macro actionable. So you say what you're going to do is you're going to break down a list of tasks or journeys, rather. So you're going to take that macro and you're going to say, okay, we have our buyer's journey. Let's break that down into more manageable tasks that we want to develop specific pieces of content for. So if we were taking a car sort of purchase scenario, you could break that down into a lot of different pieces. Researching a new car for a buyer that's never bought a car, researching a car for a repeat buyer, researching a car for a person who's leasing a car, converting a lease to purchase. So you are able, once you do that, to then figure out what types of specific content are required for each of those instances and each of those various types of tasks. Now, the research is just one piece of it. Then you get to like the purchase. The other advantage of this is you're looking at all the various touch points. So you're looking at what types of content can we optimize in all those touch points. And it allows you to do that in a way that you haven't been able to do that before, because you're really focused on this more overarching task, right? But then the micro steps that are involved in order to get there, and looking at it holistically, but also like top down and then bottom up. So it gives you a holistic content experience.
Very nice.
It also seems like it maps really well to this whole idea of structured content and breaking things into smaller pieces, because when you start to look at a document, you realize quickly that inside the document it's not just the one task. Often there's many micro tasks hidden inside the steps that you give to somebody about how to accomplish a task. And by making them molecular, we can point to them, right? We can repurpose them. Do you get the same kind of benefits from the customer journey map exercise, but because you'll learn what things need to be isolated and should be separate?
You do. And I want to talk a little bit. So you can go online and figure out how to build out a customer journey. There's templates, there's maps. I did a 31-page step-by-step white paper. Go to our website, download it for free. But that's not rocket science, but there's certain things that you want to really dive into. So for the purposes of this, and I created a cheat sheet you can download, the 8 areas I think that are really important to dive into. One is you want to look at, first of all, when you're looking at data, and data is very important, you want to emphasize quality over quantity. So for each of those touch points, get the right people that are experts in those touch points involved in the conversations. So the in-store people or the chatbot people or the social people, where they plug into that piece of the journey, and not just ask them, what would you measure here? But also ask them, what content would you recommend? What are the customers doing with this content? And ask them what's going to move them to go from one step to the journey to the next. You also want to look at, from a content perspective, ask yourself, why are they not, like, why, you want to ask, why are they not arriving to that touch point? Like, if they're not arriving to it.
Yeah, right.
For example, and Scott, you and I had chatted about this because you had shared a pain point you had when you were doing like research on an error code for a dishwasher that you had an error code. And when you went to do that search, you did not find optimized in the SEO the error code that was taking you to the site of the manufacturer. It took you to like some third-party site.
Like your repair website, the third party who was super savvy and had optimized their content to be found.
And that's an example. If you were to go through a customer journey content mapping exercise, one of the things you're going to do is you're going to say, why aren't they arriving at the touch point, and why are they arriving at the touch point? And you go through that, and then you list the content that should be there or isn't there in that exercise. And that's going to tell you what's missing. So going through that, for example, can help you identify missing content. You're also going to go through a competitive audit. You're going to look at each step in that micro journey. And you're going to say, what are the competitors offering? So you're going to repeat those steps. The difference between doing a competitive audit, content audit, where you just have this massive spreadsheet and you're looking at their content and your content, is you're mapping that against a particular user scenario or task. So you're putting yourself in the customer's eyes of trying to accomplish something, and you're seeing in real time, what's the customer experiencing by going through this, and what's the competitor offering. So it gives you a unique perspective on the competitive advantage there. And then you can go back and say, do I need to possibly be thinking about putting content here that you know, we're missing?
Sure.
Yeah, it seems it's so important to think about the customer and where they're coming at you from. So if we have content and it's really good in one place and it's really good in another place, but those two things are different, the customer may come through different doors. And you're saying that they might actually come through a competitor's door, right? So you have to make sure that you understand how many different doors they may come through, and then set up your content strategy to allow a unified view across all of those doors, right?
You do, which also, when you're looking at it, so I said, make a list of the touch points and are they not getting there? You want to look at also the touch points and say, okay, why are they leaving them? So what are the break points? It could be that they're going off to do more research. They're always going to do that. Can we get a better price? Or what is somebody else saying about this? Or they just go off to do something else. But what you want to do when you're putting yourself in the mindset of the customer, and you have that collaborative team that's going to help you do this, is you want to say, okay, are they going to do research on how to convert a lease of a car to buying the car? Okay, what third-party sites give them the information to empower them to do that, and what tools and calculators do they have that we could be offering on our site that they're not getting? Like, so it helps you uncover those content opportunities by looking at why they're leaving the touch points. So getting back to your point about that door and thinking of the touch point as a door and the competitor coming in from, but also going out of, it really helps you provide that lens and that point.
My university, Indiana University, used to have a campaign because they have a commuter college network along with Indiana University, the famous university that everybody knows exists in Bloomington, Indiana. But it had these satellite campuses, and their message was one university with 8 front doors, and they were recognizing people come to education from different places and different lifestyles and different situations. And
I love that.
I love it.
It makes a lot of sense. That also is kind of gives us a great opportunity for Megan to tell our audience a little bit about Zoom In software, which helps bring in content from different places, kind of like 7 different windows, if you will.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So Zoom In ingests technical product content from any source, and it doesn't matter if it's structured or unstructured, where it was created, what part of the customer journey it pertains to. We deliver it into a documentation portal. We will put it inside a community or customer service site, and even inside the product. And the idea is to get a unified customer experience across all of those places. And with this unified experience, customers can quickly and easily find the answers that they need. And at the same time, your organization can increase product adoption and significantly reduce support costs. We also have an analytics tool that covers all of that content so that we're able to see analytics, not just from the website, but what content is and is not being viewed across all of those different touch points.
Excellent. And that makes a lot of sense. And it also explains why we need a customer journey map in order to map those touch points and make sure that those pieces of content can get to the right places. We'll need to know when they should be delivered, why they should be delivered. And then, of course, as Kevin talked about, be able to measure whether or not they were successful in achieving that. So, Kevin, let's get back to the customer journey map for just a minute. After we build one, what are some key considerations for implementing it? It seems like we want to have a plan for this.
Yeah, and I kind of touched on some of them. I think that making it actionable is the real key thing. So coming up with realistic tasks that are prioritized that you can then map that content to. But the measurement strategy is really the key to success. And that means that you have the right types of analytics that you're measuring. You have a performance strategy built into it. So you're going back and you're looking at that content, and then you're reporting back out on that to the appropriate people. These are cross channels. So you're going to be reporting back out to multiple teams. You're not just going to have this siloed. So one of the benefits that Megan, you asked about is this forces you to be customer centric in your operations. You can't take a siloed approach to this. So it does force more of a non-siloed operating model and gets those teams to start talking in a more cross-channel, or what some might call an omni-channel manner, because they have to work that way in order for these to be successful. So the key to success in implementing these is that you start with ones that are going to work, which means you've broken them down to a level where you can map content that makes sense for the customer, like we talked about. Another key for success, and this I've seen people not do this. And you're talking about a minimal investment when it comes down to it, but that's user testing. It is a customer journey. It has to be validated by an end user. You cannot roll these out and say, we know what our customers are, we don't have to test them. Even if it's as simple as you're putting it in front of a few users, that is critical for the success. And you can't skimp on that piece of it. But what I would say for proper implementation is do a proof of concept. Take 1 or 2 journeys, roll them out, learn what works and doesn't work, and then scale your operational model and everything else around that, and then continue to roll those out. But again, it comes down to using content that's going to work and be effective, so you can show that as a use case that was proven to be effective.
Very nice. So I want to home in on one thing. On one thing, and that is, you were talking about metrics. And when we spoke before, you talked specifically about using content performance metrics to quantify the customer experience. I, as somebody who used to manage content teams and now manage customer experience, this is a fabulous topic. Can we talk a little more about that?
Well, the first key is that a customer experience person should be involved in these conversations. So when you're forming that collaborative team for your customer journey, get them involved. So one of the things is you want to, when you're talking about how you measure the success of the customer journey, you can go back and forth. There's 2 ways to look at it in terms of the priority. Some people will say you want to measure whether or not the customer journey was successful by did they complete the actual task, right? So did they go from one step of the journey to the next, where how many people completed the task? But another way of looking at it is customer satisfaction. did they complete the task and were they satisfied? So we call this like a net performer score, right? Were they would they recommend our brand to other people, basically?
Net promoter score, right?
Did I say? Yep. What did I say?
That's all right.
You said it.
I got you. Got your back. Net promoter is what it is. You said performer. That's okay.
Right. And you also can look at like the customer satisfaction score and the customer effort score. These are 3 scores that you really want to build in from your customer experience scoring mechanism. And to do that, you're going to need a customer experience person such as yourself, Megan, there in order to help do that. Now, what you want to do is you want to cross-reference so you're going to take the content metrics. When you're building out the customer journey, each of those areas that we saw in it, so you have the customer profile, which is going to have specific metrics tied to it. You have the customer life cycle, the awareness, discovery, those have metrics. So awareness, it's building brand perception. That can be measured in things, various different types of metrics. You have conversion metrics like ROI, cross-sell, upsell, new customer retention, etc. Then you have traditional metrics per channel, so web analytic metrics. You want to build these all together, and you want to look at the content performance metrics and cross-reference them to the customer experience metrics. It gets a little complicated. I created a handout that I uploaded that tells you a little bit more about thinking about this. But think about customer satisfaction as a primary indicator as to whether or not that customer journey is successful, and use content metrics to cross-reference it as well. And that gets you to a starting point for using content metrics to help quantify the success of your customer experience. Does that answer your question, Megan, or is it getting too murky there?
I think what I hear you saying is when we're linking content metrics to customer satisfaction or net promoter score, content is an avenue for you to put sort of a poll question out there to say, how do you feel about us?
Absolutely.
And they may be talking about, because you can't really separate, you put content out there and then you say, how do you feel about us? And you can't say it's because the content was well written or wasn't well written. It might be because of that, but they might come in and say, well, yeah, you clearly stated the policy, but I hate the policy, so I'm going to give you a 1 star, right? So I think what you're saying is that metric that you get from CSAT scores connected with content feedback actually can give you a broader view of how they're feeling about your company in general. Is that right?
And they should be tied together, in my opinion. But I also think there's ways to do a deeper dive into looking at how content performs. And so if somebody downloads a piece of content or doesn't download it, right, that says something about your brand or can say something about your brand. You got to do some qualitative analysis, and that may mean you have to do a user survey. And the other thing I was going to point out, the other thing about quantifying the customer experience here, and I put this in my the sheet to download, you have to look at the qualitative. You cannot just, when you're trying to look at the metrics for the customer journey, it's not all analytics. So when we're talking about analytics, there's hard and there's soft. And the hard are like web analytics. They tell you what is happening. You can get that from that's the quantitative. The qualitative, again, goes into that user, the feedback or the survey or the testing or the focus group or the in-shopper, the following the shopper, that sort of qualitative assessment is required to validate the journey. And what you want to do, for example, when you are trying to figure out why a customer didn't go from one step of the journey to the next, you can see that they've dropped off. But in order to get the qualitative data, you're going to have to use qualitative assessments to figure that out. And you can build in to the content performance metrics an assessment that's going to give you that information to help you also quantify where in the customer experience there's a breakdown, right? So I think we need to closely link these together. They've never, in a lot of brands or organizations, they haven't been tied together the way they should be tied together. Yeah, the argument I'm trying to make.
I send out a Friday email called a Friday Reflection, and this past week I actually I curate information from other places, and one of the things, it was all about narrative and creating a narrative, and somebody laid out a perfect way to take quantitative data and qualitative data and use that to create your narrative. And she was saying, you can't use just one or the other. You have to have both. And here's how they build on each other. It just creates a much, much better narrative.
That's great. Speaking of narrative, while we're here explaining a little bit about customer journey maps, for those of you who thought your customer journey was going to end with us at the 30-minute mark, we are going a little bit overtime today. But if you have to escape, you can come back later and watch the recording of today's show using the same URL that you're watching right now. We'll also send you an email alerting you that you can watch the recording in case you forget, and you can share that with others. We hope that you do. Kevin, we got some questions from the audience, but before we answer those, I wanted to tackle the last two questions we have for you. The first one I had was, how do we avoid this customer journey map becoming just another expensive consulting engagement that delivers some that sits somewhere on the land but never offers any real value?
That nice decoration in the corner office cube. Again, it gets down. That's where I think when you break them down into these lower level journeys or these more micro journeys, you make them actionable. I mean, that's the real benefit of taking them to the level that we're talking about here. Because you can then map real content that you can then put measurements to that content, and you can see really what the impact of it is and whether or not it's moving the needle. And you're not going to get it right all the time. I mean, there's going to be points where but that's a learning experience too. And you can take that into your customer experience, strategy, into your content strategy, into your web and, your e-commerce strategies or whatever these are tied to, and then modify that based on where you need to go.
Excellent suggestion. And it seems like by bringing all those people together from different teams, they're all going to be exposed to these new lessons learned, and they may have aha moments of their own that would make the customer journey better along the way.
Yeah. And I mean, and getting back to, like, I really love from an enterprise content strategy, we always try to do integrated teams, like getting a customer experience. Like, how difficult is it to put like a net promoter score on top of a content survey, right? Like, it's not, but so often that doesn't happen when you're assessing content or when you're assessing a customer journey, putting the content question in there, which is one or two questions, So bringing these together is only going to build a more comprehensive solution. From a customer standpoint, they're not bifurcating these teams. They're not seeing those silos. And we've talked about this ad nauseum, but we still, as organizations or brands, don't always follow this,
Right. It's so important. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, why don't you slide in your last question and I'll take some questions.
Okay. So you were talking about sort of this cross-functional publishing, and it's so important to get cross-channel publishing right, especially when attempting to sort of personalize this content experience at scale. So what are some of the hurdles that content folks need to overcome when attempting to choreograph all of these different content channels that are coming in?
I mean, the biggest hurdle is, in our experience, analytics is a huge one because the cross-channel tracking can get really gnarly. Now they're coming up with trying to come up with like, CDPs the customer data platforms try to account for it, or the data lakes. But especially tracking the anonymous user to the known user can be really difficult. But one of the biggest hurdles, I think, is the organizations themselves. The politics still get in the way. The internal silos get in the way. One thing that we found, and this is another benefit of the customer journey, if you can get everybody to align on the goals and the objectives of the journey and that the customer is at the center of it, you can start to have conversations around the operational modeling and what's required to support that from an operations perspective. You can wrap your tech stack around the operations journey. You can wrap the architecture around the operations journey, the business processing engineering around the customer journey. You can start to have conversations that way that take out the political elements, and people focused on that.
Yes. And some of the questions that we have coming in are actually around content metrics and some of these things. So someone asked for an example of a content metric, and I want to respond to what you just said and also incorporate that. The idea of cutting through the politics, really it comes down to, if you have analytics across the entire enterprise, then you get rid of this idea of my content's performing great, so they should come through my door, or your content's doing awful, so they shouldn't come through your door, right? And there becomes it becomes a competition if you don't have analytics that cross all of it. And so a content metric would be, I mean, you can look at sort of the general Google Analytics stuff, the search, the traffic or whatever, but we actually dive into how fresh is your content, how popular is your content, and then what's the intersection between freshness and popularity. We'll look at what content is not being viewed and how does that help your team and every other team out there to understand what type of content they should be focusing on. So hopefully that answers one question. And then another question about metrics that I'd love for you to hit on, Kevin, is someone said they've heard about CSAT or customer satisfaction, but they aren't sure about customer effort score. So do you have a good definition for that?
For which one? I'm sorry.
For our CES, customer effort score.
The way that I would define that is how satisfied they are with it. I mean, how would you define it?
I would say when you look at your product or when you look at your support team, sometimes folks will bring in this customer effort score and it'll be how difficult was it to do the task you meant to do in our product, or how difficult was it to get the support that you needed? And so they'll ask various questions that get them to a number that says either the customer effort was really high, which is not good, or the customer effort
score. You asked about the CES. Sorry. Yes. Customer effort scores are quantified specifically on the effort that it's going to take for a customer. And this is very important for customer journey. I'm sorry. I did not understand you. Yes, it is specifically to the amount of effort that it is required to accomplish a certain task. And and this is very important for customer journeys. When you're evaluating the efficacy of a customer journey, you want to look at this specifically. So what you're looking at is how difficult it is for them to accomplish something. Right. So it could be use a product. You can test customer journeys, for example, like if you were going to do user testing of it, you might put forth different scenarios in front of users if you wanted to see which one they could do the best or the easiest. You do this navigation and you test what takes the most effort, basically. And this will give you an idea of how difficult it is for them to accomplish something. It's called customer effort score. Yes.
Excellent. Yes. And I think we need that in technical documentation land just as much as anywhere else. Kevin, are there journey orchestration tools that we might consider telling the viewers of today's show about that could help them create customer journeys, or is there such a thing?
There's a lot of different tools out there. Okay. And there's various content management systems. Some of them claim they have capabilities around this. There's what's called journey orchestration tools. And in my handout, I have a link. I actually put one of the latest Forrester Wave graphics because they plot out Forrester Wave. Forrester is an analyst company that rates technology solutions, and it shows you the top performers. And the orchestration tools, by the way, if you hear that term, what that is, they're tools to try to automate the process of creating journeys across channels, and then they serve up content in real time. And they're fairly sophisticated because they're doing individualized journeys. They're doing it for like personalization. They're not cheap tools generally. There are like Adobe has a product, but there's also cheaper ones. There's like Giffel has one, OmniGaf has various ones. I put a link into my thing that also, there was an author that wrote up a list of tools, some of which are free, or you can start with like you can do so many journeys for free on some of them. It's an idea. New
tools are popping in all the time, I hear you say.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is we tend to be technology agnostic. I don't favor any of them, and frankly, they all have issues. Like some people love them and then some people don't. So it depends. If you're going to actually invest in one, you would want to do a proper vendor assessment and requirements assessment and determine which tool meets your needs. But there's a lot written out there, and I would start with the analyst reports and see what they have to say about it.
Excellent. And our last question today is, at what point of the design life cycle should the journey mapping be done? And this is from one of our audience members watching today's show live.
What point of the journey life cycle should the journey mapping be done?
Yeah, and like the design of a new solution life cycle, when does journey mapping start? Is it the first thing? Is it, would you wait till the end? When does journey mapping begin?
So in terms of the product life cycle, in terms of, I'm sorry.
So the design life cycle, so probably the product design, I would assume.
Or if you're designing a new website, say, or so if you're designing a website, you would put this into the design phase, right? Like, if you're designing a product, I would think, in the design phase, but you could also take it into implementation. The thing about journeys is that you definitely want to have a really good understanding of your customer. So if you have a strong product development process where you have new product introduction and they have lots of great customer insights and all those data points that are going to give you exactly what it is that you need, you can probably start it in the design phase. If you want to, if you want to wait for testing and all that, you might want to do it like pre-launch. If we're talking about like an interface design, like a new web project or a platform, like a CMS rollout, we typically put it in the design phase. Or a content strategy enterprise engagement, we would put it in the design phase.
Okay, perfect. So thanks to Kevin for making time to be on our show today. Thank you, Kevin. And thanks to you, our audience, for being here. Check your inbox for an invitation for our next Content Advantage talk show, which takes place Tuesday, January 5th, 2021, in the new year.
Wow.
When we chat with Mark Hellinger, can you believe it's the new year?
Right.
When we chat with Mark Hellinger, who runs a company called Videate, who's going to talk about a straightforward approach to making automatically making and assembling video technical documentation. So you don't want to miss that. Definitely.
It's a really, really cool thing they have going on. But I just want to say, please, we want to hear your feedback. We want to know if you have ideas for us on future topics or guests. We want to know how we did today. So please use the Rate This tab that's located in your viewing panel. Give us a 1 to 5 star rating, and then use the comment box to fill in some additional info about how we did, what we could do better, or who you want to see on a future Content Advantage show.
Excellent. All right. And let's see, we've got webinar tomorrow coming up as well. So if you are opening your inbox, you can't probably help but see some stuff from the Content Wrangler every once in a while. Don't be surprised when you get an invitation to our next webinar. We've got webinars coming up in 2021, a whole slew of them, probably 50 or 60 that we're just starting to launch. So you'll see those over the next couple of weeks. You've been watching this show called The Content Advantage, and today's show is being recorded. So shortly after we sign off, if you click on the link you're using to watch the live show, you'll be taken to a recording that you can watch on demand or that you can share with other people. And we hope that you do. On behalf of myself, and I'm Scott Abel, and my co-host Megan Gahuli, we'd like to thank you for making time to watch our show today. Hope you'll join us for upcoming episodes. Until then, be safe and be well. Keep doing great work. We'd really like to see you back here on a future show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kevin.
Ensure your customers find the answers they need with Zoomin. Bring together product content from all teams and sources to deliver a unified, personalized content experience. Check us out at www.zoominsoftware.com.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.